expansion was discussed both at a committee level and at the board, and ultimately the league office was tasked by our board with doing an in-depth analysis of all the issues around expansion, both economic and...
The room was completely silent, but the tension felt louder than a sold-out arena. Sitting across from executive directors and international representatives, the biggest star in women's basketball remained calm. Her eyes were fixed on a framed USA basketball uniform lying flat on the table. Printed across the navy blue jersey was a number that wasn't hers. It wasn't the familiar number 22 that millions of fans around the world had come to recognize. Instead, it was number 12. For the committee, it was simply a routine assignment based on long-standing international regulations. But for the player who had transformed television ratings and packed arenas over the previous 18 months, it carried a much deeper meaning. It seemed like a quiet effort to reduce a powerful personal brand and remind a rookie of her place. What the officials didn't expect was her response. She didn't argue. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't create a scene. Instead, she calmly slid the jersey back across the table, stood up, and made it clear that if this was how they wanted to handle the situation, they would have to move forward without her. In that moment, what had become one of the most valuable Olympic marketing opportunities in sports suddenly stood on the edge of falling apart. To understand how events reached this point behind closed doors, it's important to understand what that particular number represents. In today's sports world, a jersey number is much more than fabric worn during a game. It's a brand. When Caitlin Clark dominated college basketball at Iowa, the number 22 became closely associated with deep three-pointers, record-setting television audiences, and a major shift in the popularity of women's basketball. Sportswear companies built major campaigns around that identity. Young fans filled arenas wearing custom hoodies, shoes, and replica jerseys, all carrying the same number. By the time she entered the WNBA with the Indiana Fever, those two digits had already produced tens of millions of dollars in value through ticket sales, television deals, merchandise, and global marketing opportunities. So when USA basketball officials viewed the jersey assignment as nothing more than a standard administrative decision, they overlooked the much bigger picture. Changing that number wasn't simply a small cosmetic adjustment for an international tournament. It represented far more than a routine uniform change. VidIQ. It was the removal of an identity that had almost instantly revived an entire sports economy. But that was only the visible part of a much larger conflict developing behind the scenes. The controversy had actually started weeks earlier when the first roster decisions were finalized. Public reaction to leaving the sport's biggest attraction off the main roster was immediate and intense. Major television networks quickly became concerned as executives estimated the possible loss of casual viewers. Corporate sponsors also voiced concerns about losing valuable exposure during the peak summer broadcast schedule. Behind closed doors, emergency meetings were held to determine how to manage the growing backlash without appearing to give in to public pressure. Officials publicly cited traditional selection standards, physical fitness, and veteran experience as the reasons behind the decision. However, internal sources suggested the real conflict was developing inside the locker room. Veteran players who had spent more than a decade building the foundation of international basketball believed that rising stars should earn their place through the established system. In their view, paying your dues mattered more than receiving special treatment, no matter how many fans a player attracted or how many tickets were sold. That difference in philosophy created the conditions for a confrontation that few expected. When an unexpected opportunity opened on the national team because of player availability and scheduling changes, the selection committee extended an offer. On paper, it appeared to be the perfect solution to calm the public relations crisis while also improving international television ratings. But when the details of the offer arrived, they included conditions that felt less like a genuine invitation and more like an effort to reinforce authority over the newcomer. The assignment of jersey number 12 was explained as a simple commitment to long-standing international numbering traditions. For many years, international competitions followed strict numbering rules for team rosters, leaving very little flexibility for personal branding. However, in recent seasons, those restrictions had become much more relaxed across several competitions, allowing athletes to keep their familiar domestic numbers for consistency in marketing and brand recognition. Giving number 12 to the sport's biggest commercial star was not simply an unavoidable administrative requirement. It appeared to send a clear message disguised as standard procedure, suggesting that within this program, individual identity came second to complete organizational conformity. As soon as the proposal reached the players' management team, the response was immediate. Accepting a mandatory identity change under the banner of institutional tradition could establish a concerning precedent for future commercial partnerships. It suggested that an athlete could generate enormous attention and financial value for a governing organization while having little influence over her own image rights and personal brand. Clark's decision to decline participation under those conditions reportedly caught the committee by surprise. Many believed that the honor of representing the country on the international stage would outweigh any concerns related to marketing or personal branding. They expected the young star to accept the assigned uniform, follow the established system, and take her place on the roster without objection. Instead, they underestimated how much the business of modern sports has changed. Today's athletes are no longer viewed as simple pieces within a larger organization. They have become independent media brands with direct connections to millions of fans, often matching or even exceeding the reach of the institutions that oversee them. The decision to push back was never presented as being only about a jersey number. It represented a broader statement about personal identity, brand ownership, and the changing balance of influence between athletes and sports organizations. But what happened next would surprise nearly everyone involved in those negotiations. VidIQ. As the standoff continued, the financial impact started growing at an alarming pace. Major television networks that had secured broadcasting rights for the games began raising serious concerns about projected viewership during primetime hours. Travel agencies also reported a noticeable decline in ticket packages purchased by domestic fans who had planned to travel overseas to watch the games in person. Broadcast partners quickly recognized that without the sport's biggest attraction on the court, many casual fans who had followed the season would simply turn to other forms of summer entertainment. League officials realized they were facing a major commercial setback, yet their pride kept them from publicly reversing their decision. Acknowledging an error would weaken the committee's authority and upset senior veterans who had pushed for strict adherence to long-standing procedures. They found themselves caught between defending an outdated system and protecting the biggest financial surge the sport had experienced in more than 50 years. That was when NBA Commissioner Adam Silver stepped beyond the usual protocol and entered the discussion. While the NBA and WNBA operate under separate executive structures, Silver has consistently monitored business decisions that influence the overall reach of professional basketball. During a public media session, he was directly questioned about the ongoing controversy surrounding roster selections and team management. Instead of giving a routine public relations response, Silver offered thoughtful and carefully measured remarks that acknowledged the internal tension while subtly criticizing how the matter had been handled. He explained that in today's sports industry, fan engagement and financial growth are closely connected to recognizable star personalities. He emphasized that while team traditions remain important, ignoring what the audience clearly wants is one of the fastest ways to lose cultural relevance. His comments sent shockwaves throughout executive offices, confirming to the public that the internal conflict was genuine and that intervention from higher leadership was becoming necessary to protect the league's long-term business interests. Silver's public statements brought what had been internal politics into full public view. Behind closed doors, veteran players within the national program had quietly expressed frustration for months over the overwhelming amount of media attention centered on one rookie. For more than 2 decades, women's basketball had been built by dedicated pioneers who competed before small crowds, accepted modest salaries, and traveled through demanding schedules without many of the comforts available today. They had established the foundation of the sport through determination, sacrifice, and persistence. Seeing a newcomer arrive and immediately receive record-setting shoe contracts, primetime television exposure, and worldwide endorsement opportunities created understandable resentment among many veterans. Several experienced players believed that the media was overlooking years of hard work in order to focus almost entirely on one individual. This situation created an atmosphere where giving up something as simple as a jersey number felt, to some, like giving away the history of the sport in favor of modern excitement. The tension extended well beyond the locker room and reached corporate sponsors with major financial investments in the outcome. Leading athletic apparel companies had invested millions developing marketing campaigns centered around specific jersey numbers, team colors, and player identities. A sudden change to an unfamiliar jersey assignment disrupted carefully planned product launches, print advertising campaigns, and global distribution strategies that were already underway. Corporate representatives privately voiced their concerns, warning league leadership that weakening a player's established brand identity could have direct financial consequences for future sponsorship agreements. When an athlete's personal brand is intentionally reduced, the entire commercial ecosystem built around that athlete is affected. Corporate partners made it clear that their priority was maximizing the return on their investments rather than preserving traditional institutional gatekeeping. While league executives argued over protocol and sponsors calculated potential financial losses, public reaction toward the governing body became increasingly negative. Social media platforms were flooded with criticism accusing the organization of being disconnected from today's fans. Online petitions collected tens of thousands of signatures almost overnight, demanding immediate changes to the leadership of the selection committee. Supporters highlighted what they viewed as a clear contradiction, using a player's image to promote ticket sales and television broadcasts while denying that same player a fair opportunity on the active roster. The public narrative had shifted completely, changing from what first appeared to be a routine administrative decision into a broader story of an outdated establishment resisting the rise of a transformational talent. With each passing day that the standoff remained unresolved, the pressure continued to grow. The organization's reputation suffered another major setback in the court of public opinion. As the deadline to finalize the international roster approached, pressure on the selection committee reached its highest level. They found themselves considering possibilities they had previously ruled out as unrealistic. Could they quietly adjust the team guidelines to allow custom jersey numbers for high-profile players? Could they release a joint statement explaining that technical mistakes in the original roster documents had caused the confusion, helping everyone save face? Or would they stand by their decision, leave their biggest star off the international team, and accept the significant drop in worldwide television ratings? The debate continued for hours, with intense disagreements between traditional committee members determined to uphold strict discipline and forward-thinking executives who recognized the harsh realities of today's sports business. Throughout these critical discussions, the player herself remained calm and professional. She kept every public comment focused on her responsibilities with the Indiana Fever. She avoided taking shots through the media and refused to engage in public disputes with veteran players who had criticized her. By choosing the professional approach, she maintained complete control of the situation. Every time she stepped onto the court during the regular season, she continued setting attendance records, raising television viewership, and displaying her outstanding court vision. Her performances became a constant reminder of exactly what the international team would be missing. The difference was impossible to ignore. While committee members debated policies and jersey numbers behind closed doors, she was filling 20,000-seat arenas with passionate fans who simply wanted to watch her compete. Behind the scenes, the situation eventually reached a quiet and unspoken resolution as the final international deadlines passed. Official statements from public relations departments emphasized mutual respect and a commitment to future cooperation, but the real outcome was obvious to anyone following the story closely. The long-standing model of unquestioned executive control had been permanently challenged by the rise of modern athlete influence. The committee came to understand that the rules that shaped sports 3 decades ago no longer fit an era where individual athletes often generate more media attention than the organizations that govern them. Expecting a generational talent to simply accept every bureaucratic decision was no longer practical when millions of dollars and worldwide visibility were at stake. This quiet disagreement over a single jersey number revealed much larger issues within modern sports. It highlighted the tension created by personal rivalries, corporate interests, and generational differences whenever a historic institution is forced to adapt to a rapidly changing financial landscape. Veteran players were determined to protect the legacy they had worked so hard to build, while the young superstar was simply recognizing the value she contributed to the sport. In the end, the debate was never truly about the difference between jersey number 12 and jersey number 22. It was about who really shapes the future of the game. And as professional sports continue evolving into athlete-driven entertainment ecosystems, one important question remains for every long-established organization. Will they embrace the modern era of player influence? Or will they allow their own traditions to weaken the very foundation they spent decades creating? The room was completely silent, yet the tension felt louder than a sold-out arena. Across the table from executive directors and international representatives, the biggest star in women's basketball sat calmly. Her eyes were fixed on a framed USA basketball jersey laid neatly in front of her. Printed across the navy blue fabric was a number that wasn't hers. It wasn't the familiar number 22 that millions of fans around the world had proudly worn. Instead, it was number 12. To the committee, it was simply a routine assignment based on long-standing international guidelines. But to the player who had transformed television ratings and filled arenas over the previous 18 months, it carried a very different meaning. It felt like a deliberate effort to reduce a powerful personal brand and remind a rookie of her place. What the officials didn't expect was how she would respond. She didn't argue. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't create a scene. Instead, she calmly slid the jersey back across the table, stood up, and made it clear that if this was the direction they wanted to take, they would have to continue without her. In that single moment, what had the potential to become the most profitable Olympic marketing campaign in sports history suddenly hung by a thread. To understand how events reached that point behind closed doors, it's important to recognize what that single number truly represented. In modern sports, a jersey number is far more than fabric stitched onto a uniform. It represents a brand. During her time at Iowa, Caitlin Clark turned number 22 into a symbol of deep-range three-pointers, record-breaking television audiences, and a cultural shift in women's basketball. Major apparel companies built successful marketing campaigns around that identity. Young fans packed arenas wearing custom hoodies, sneakers, and replica jerseys, all featuring the same number. By the time she entered the WNBA with the Indiana Fever, those two digits had already helped generate tens of millions of dollars through ticket sales, television rights, merchandise, and worldwide marketing. So when USA basketball officials treated the jersey assignment as nothing more than a standard administrative decision, they failed to recognize the larger issue. Changing that number wasn't simply a cosmetic adjustment for an international competition. To many, it meant removing a key part of the identity that had helped revive an entire sports market in a remarkably short time. But the jersey itself was only one part of a much larger disagreement developing behind the scenes. The controversy had actually started weeks earlier, when the original roster selections were finalized. The public response to leaving the sport's biggest attraction off the main roster was immediate and intense. Television executives quickly began estimating how much casual viewership could disappear. Corporate sponsors expressed concerns about losing valuable exposure during one of the biggest sporting events of the summer. Behind closed doors, emergency meetings were held as officials searched for a way to manage the growing backlash without appearing to reverse course because of public opinion. Publicly, decision-makers pointed to traditional selection standards, physical readiness, and veteran experience as the official reasons behind the roster decision. VidIQ.